The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Starfleet had mapped wormholes, charted subspace anomalies, and even encountered beings that existed outside conventional spacetime. But what happens when something emerges from the Bajoran wormhole that defies not the laws of physics, but the very assumptions about what intelligent life should be capable of? Deep Space Nine's sensors screamed warnings as the wormhole blossomed open with violent, irregular energy patterns. On the station's operations center, Major Kira Nerys watched the view screen with growing alarm as something massive began to emerge, not the graceful, organic shapes of the Prophet's realm, but a vessel of pure geometric aggression. Wedge-shaped, bristling with weapon emplacements, painted in pale gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "That's not Dominion," Chief O'Brien muttered, hands flying across his console. "The power signatures are all wrong. It's not warp drive, not Jem'Hadar impulse, not anything in our database." Captain Benjamin Sisko stood from his chair, eyes fixed on the crippled vessel tumbling through space. Hull breaches vented atmosphere in crystalline plumes. Entire sections showed catastrophic damage, as if the ship had been torn apart and reassembled incorrectly by forces it was never designed to withstand. "Hail them." "No response, sir," Dax reported, her fingers dancing across the communications array. "Their transmission systems are. I'm reading energy signatures, but they're not compatible with our subspace frequencies. It's like they're trying to broadcast on wavelengths that don't exist in our spacetime." The Star Destroyer listed violently to port, secondary explosions rippling across its hull. Whatever battle it had fought to reach this universe, it was losing the final engagement against physics itself. "Life signs?" Sisko demanded. "Detecting hundreds of humanoid readings, but the biofilters are having trouble getting a lock. Their molecular structures are reading as slightly out of phase." "No, that's not right either. It's as if they're vibrating at a frequency 0.03% different from our baseline reality." Dax looked up, confusion evident in her joined trill features. "Benjamin, I don't think they're from our universe at all." Before Sisko could respond, Kira's tactical console erupted with new alerts. 3 Jem'Hadar attack ships decloaking, bearing 270 Mark IV. They're moving to intercept the unknown vessel. Of course they were. The Dominion had scouts monitoring the wormhole constantly, and they detected the anomaly just as quickly as DS9. Anything emerging from the Celestial Temple was of immediate strategic interest, especially during a war that was grinding the Alpha Quadrant into dust. Red alert. Raise shields. "O'Brien, can we extend our shields around that ship?" "Not at this range, sir. And given the damage, I'm not sure their hull could survive a tractor beam." Sisko watched the Jem'Hadar ships close in, attack formation perfect, ruthlessly efficient. In minutes they'd either destroy the crippled vessel or board it, and every technological secret it contained would belong to the Founders. He couldn't allow that. Whatever universe had spat this ship into the wormhole, its crew deserved better than assimilation into the Dominion war machine. "Dax, open a channel on all frequencies, subspace, electromagnetic, anything that might get through. Continuous loop." Sisko straightened, projecting command presence even across the void. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Benjamin Sisko of the United Federation of Planets Station Deep Space Nine. You are in grave danger. We are prepared to offer assistance and asylum. Please respond." Static. Electromagnetic hash. Then. A voice, filtered through layers of interference, speaking with crystalline precision and an accent that belonged to no known species. "This is Grand Admiral Thrawn of the Galactic Empire. Our vessel has sustained critical damage and my crew requires immediate evacuation. I propose a temporary alliance of mutual benefit." The words were calm, measured, as if the speaker was discussing a minor scheduling conflict rather than imminent death. No panic. No desperation. Pure calculated assessment. Kira's eyes widened. "Grand Admiral." Benjamin, whatever government he represents uses military ranks we haven't seen since Earth's pre-Federation era. That's old-style authoritarianism. Noted, Sisko replied, mind already racing through diplomatic protocols and strategic implications. Major, beam their survivors directly to Cargo Bay 4. Erect Level 10 force fields and post security teams. Dax, get Dr. Bashir down there with full medical staff. O'Brien. Already rerouting power to the transporters, sir. This is going to be tricky. Their molecular patterns are so far outside our baseline that the biofilters might reject them as non-organic matter. Then turn off the biofilters. We'll deal with contamination later. The Jem'Hadar ships opened fire, Polaron beams slicing into the Star Destroyer's dying shields. The unknown vessel returned fire. Brilliant emerald energy bolts that moved slower than phasers but hit with devastating kinetic force, punching through one attacker's shields through sheer overwhelming power. Fascinating, Dax breathed. Those weapons don't use particle beams at all. They're accelerating plasma to relativistic speeds using magnetic containment. Crude by our standards, but effective. The transporter room chief's voice crackled over the comm, Captain, we're getting them. First group materializing now. Sir, you need to see this. Sisko didn't wait. He strode toward the turbolift, Kira matching his pace. As the doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of the Star Destroyer breaking apart, its massive hull succumbing to structural failure. Metal screamed silently in vacuum as the Imperial vessel died, hemorrhaging escape pods and debris into the cold embrace of space. When the cargo bay doors opened, Sisko found himself facing rows of figures in white armor, eerily identical, weapons raised but not firing. Stormtroopers, his mind supplied from some half-remembered ancient Earth history text. Behind them stood officers in gray-green uniforms, and at the center, a Chiss. Sisko recognized the species from Starfleet's enology databases, though they were rare this far from unexplored space. Blue skin, red eyes glowing with an intelligence that seemed to catalog everything in microseconds. Tall, composed, studying the cargo bay with the same analytical precision a scientist might examine a particularly interesting specimen. The being who could only be Grand Admiral Thrawn inclined his head in a gesture of respect that somehow conveyed neither submission nor arrogance. Captain Sisko. Your intervention was timely. I am in your debt. You're welcome aboard Deep Space Nine, Sisko replied carefully. Though I have to ask. What empire do you represent, and how did you come to be in our space? Thrawn's eyes flickered to the force fields, the security officers with phaser rifles, the strange architecture of a universe his empire had never touched. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute certainty. I represent an empire that no longer exists in this reality, Captain. As for how I arrived. Those red eyes met Sisko's directly, measuring, analyzing. I believe that is a question best discussed in private. You strike me as a man who understands the strategic value of information. Behind Thrawn, the stormtroopers maintained perfect formation, weapons tracking potential threats with mechanical precision. The Imperial officers stood rigid, awaiting orders from their Grand Admiral as if the destruction of their ship and the loss of their entire universe were merely setbacks to be overcome through discipline. Sisko felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. The Dominion War was bleeding the Federation white. Section 31 operated in shadows, making compromises that violated everything Starfleet stood for. And now a military genius from another reality had just landed in his lap, bringing technology, tactics, and loyalties that were complete unknowns. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. Mr. Thrawn, Sisko said quietly, I think we need to talk about exactly what kind of universe you found yourself in. The Grand Admiral smiled, a slight, knowing expression that suggested he'd already begun 10 moves ahead. The conference room aboard Deep Space Nine had hosted countless diplomatic negotiations, Bajoran ministers, Cardassian prefects, even the occasional Vorta emissary delivering the Founder's ultimatums. But Captain Sisko had never sat across from someone who studied him with quite the same intensity as Grand Admiral Thrawn. The Chiss sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, red eyes moving in subtle patterns that suggested he was reading more than just body language. On the wall behind Sisko hung a Bajoran tapestry depicting the prophets guiding the faithful through the celestial temple, abstract figures in flowing robes, rendered in deep crimsons and golds. Thrawn's gaze had lingered on it for exactly 3 seconds when he entered, then never returned. But Sisko had the uncomfortable feeling that those 3 seconds had told the Grand Admiral more about Bajoran culture than most scholars learned in years. "Your station," Thrawn began, his accent placing strange emphasis on certain syllables, "was not constructed by your Federation. The architecture suggests Cardassian engineering, utilitarian, designed for occupation rather than exploration. Yet you command it now. The transition of power was recent. Within the last 5 years. It wasn't a question." Sisko kept his expression neutral. "The Cardassians withdrew from Bajorans 3 years ago. Starfleet was invited to administer the station and help the Bajoran people rebuild." Invited. Thrawn considered the word as if tasting wine. A diplomatic phrasing for a strategic necessity. The Cardassians left a power vacuum. Your Federation filled it to prevent less benevolent forces from doing so. Those red eyes flickered with something that might have been approval. Pragmatism dressed in altruism. I recognized the pattern. Major Kira bristled from her position against the wall, but Sisko raised a hand slightly. Thrawn noticed the gesture, catalogued it, filed it away. "You mentioned an empire," Sisko said, steering the conversation back. "One that no longer exists in this reality. I need to understand what that means." Thrawn glanced at the viewport where stars wheeled slowly past, constellations utterly foreign to a man from a galaxy far away. "My empire controlled thousands of systems across our galaxy. It was forged from the ashes of a corrupt republic, unified under the vision of Emperor Palpatine. Order. Stability. The eradication of chaos." He paused, reading Sisko's micro-expressions. "I see disapproval in your eyes, Captain. Your Federation values democracy, individual liberty, the consent of the governed. Noble principles. Tell me, are they serving you well against the enemy currently devastating your quadrant?" The directness was startling. Odo shifted in his seat, the changeling's features tightening with suspicion. "How do you know about the Dominion War?" "Your cargo bay contained pad devices displaying tactical reports. I observed them during our brief wait. The language was unfamiliar, but patterns in data are universal: casualty lists, supply requisitions, strategic deployments. You are losing." Thrawn's tone held no judgment, only analysis. "Your enemy employs genetically engineered soldiers who worship their leaders as gods. They offer subjugation or annihilation. And your Federation, bound by principles of ethical warfare, finds itself unable to match their ruthlessness." Sisko leaned forward. "We're not losing. We're holding the line. A distinction without meaningful difference if the line continues to retreat." Thrawn gestured to the stars beyond. "Captain, I did not survive the chaos of my own galaxy by ignoring tactical reality. You saved my crew. For that, I owe you honesty. Whatever force brought me to this universe severed my connection to everything I knew. My Emperor is gone. My fleet is gone. My purpose." He paused, something almost like vulnerability crossing his features before discipline reasserted itself. "My purpose must be redefined." Dr. Bashir, who had been quietly scanning Thrawn with a medical tricorder, spoke up. "Captain, his physiology is fascinating. The blue skin isn't pigmentation, it's a result of hemocyanin-based blood chemistry instead of hemoglobin. His neural pathways show extraordinary development in the visual cortex and pattern recognition centers. I've never seen anything like it. My people, the Chiss, evolved in a region of space where perception determined survival, Thrawn explained. We learned to see connections others missed. Art, culture, behavior, they reveal the fundamental nature of a species more accurately than any intelligence report. Dax, seated next to Sisko, cocked her head with interest. You study art to understand your enemies? Art is not created in a vacuum, Commander. It reflects the deepest values, fears, and aspirations of a culture. A society that creates aggressive, angular art thinks in terms of dominance and conquest. One that favors flowing, organic forms values harmony and adaptation. Show me what a species considers beautiful, and I will tell you how they wage war. Thrawn's eyes returned to the Bajoran tapestry. Your Bajoran hosts, for instance. Their art depicts spiritual guidance, divine intervention in mortal affairs. They are a people who survived occupation by maintaining faith in something greater than themselves. This makes them resilient against physical conquest but vulnerable to spiritual manipulation. If I were your enemy, I would not attack their bodies, I would attack their beliefs. Kira's hand moved toward her phaser. That's enough. Major. Sisko's voice was quiet but firm. To Thrawn, you're making my crew uncomfortable with how quickly you're profiling us. Would you prefer I lie about my capabilities? Thrawn asked. Captain, we both know why you've isolated me in this meeting. You're assessing whether I'm an asset or a threat. Allow me to simplify your decision. He stood, moving to the viewport with careful, measured steps. I am a military strategist without a military. A Grand Admiral without a fleet. In my universe, I served order over chaos, stability over anarchy. Here. He touched the transparent aluminum, fingers tracing invisible patterns in the stars. Here I find a Federation fighting a war it cannot win through conventional means, allying with former enemies, Klingon, if the reports I observed are accurate, and compromising its principles in the shadows. How do you know about, Odo began. Section 31. Thrawn turned, and his smile was cold. Every idealistic government develops a covert operations division that does what its public face cannot. The pattern is universal. I would be disappointed if your Federation proved an exception. Sisko felt the conversation slipping into dangerous territory. Thrawn was too perceptive, too willing to speak uncomfortable truths. What do you want, Admiral? Want? Thrawn returned to his seat, movements economical and precise. I want to understand this universe. I want to study your cultures, your enemies, your art. I want to know if the principles your Federation espouses can truly withstand the fire of total war, or if they will burn away like the Republic's democracy burned in my galaxy. He met Sisko's eyes directly. And in exchange for asylum, I am willing to offer you something your Federation desperately needs, tactical victories achieved through understanding rather than firepower. The Federation doesn't employ mercenaries, Kira said sharply. No. You employ idealists who die for principles while your enemies employ pragmatists who kill for results. Thrawn's tone remained neutral, clinical. I am offering to teach you how to win without abandoning your ideals. It can be done, Captain. But it requires seeing your enemy with clarity rather than through the comfortable lens of moral superiority. The conference room fell silent. Outside, a Klingon bird of prey glided past on patrol, hunting for Dominion infiltrators in the Bajoran system. The war ground on, consuming ships and lives and hope. Sisko studied the Grand Admiral. This genius from another reality who spoke of empires and order with the same calm precision most people discussed the weather. Thrawn was dangerous. That much was obvious. But he was also right about the Federation's struggles, about the compromises being made in shadows, about the gap between ideals and survival. You'll be confined to the station under security protocols, Sisko said finally. Your stormtroopers will be disarmed and quartered separately. You'll submit to regular medical scans and agree to full transparency about your capabilities and your empire's technology. Acceptable. And if I find out you're playing both sides, or feeding intelligence to the Dominion, or manipulating my crew, you will confine me to your brig and consider me a failed experiment. Thrawn inclined his head. Captain, I am many things. A liar is not among them. If I betray you, it will be openly, as an enemy, not as a false friend. The honesty was somehow more unsettling than deception would have been. One more thing, Sisko added. The Bajoran wormhole you emerged from, we call it the Celestial Temple. It's home to beings the Bajorans worship as prophets. They exist outside linear time. Did you encounter anything when you passed through? Thrawn's expression shifted minutely. I saw possibilities. Timelines branching like neural pathways. Futures that might be, depending on choices not yet made. And I heard a voice. Multiple voices, speaking in unison, asking me a question. What question? They asked, what are you? Not who. What? Thrawn's red eyes seemed to glow in the conference room's lighting. I did not have an answer they found satisfactory. Thrawn's temporary quarters were sparse by Imperial standards but luxurious compared to a detention cell. He stood before a wall-mounted computer terminal, its interface glowing with incomprehensible script. Federation Standard, they called it, a language that had evolved from ancient Earth English but incorporated linguistic elements from Vulcan, Andorian, Tellarite, and a dozen other founding species. The universal translator embedded in the comm badge they'd given him handled spoken communication, but written language required study. He would learn it. He always did. But first, art. Thrawn had spent his first 3 hours of freedom touring the station's promenade under the watchful eye of Odo, the shape-shifting security chief. The changeling had maintained a polite distance while clearly cataloging every movement, every pause, every flicker of interest. Thrawn appreciated the professionalism. In his experience, competent security officers were rarer than competent admirals. The promenade itself was a revelation, a marketplace of cultures pressed together in close quarters, each maintaining distinct identity while participating in commercial exchange. Bajoran shopkeepers sold religious artifacts alongside Ferengi merchants hawking dubious luxuries. A Klingon restaurant served blood wine to Starfleet officers who laughed too loudly, tension in their voices betraying awareness of the war beyond the station's shields. But what fascinated Thrawn most were the art vendors. He'd purchased 17 pieces with latinum borrowed against future compensation from Starfleet. Captain Sisko had been surprisingly accommodating once Thrawn explained his methodology. Now those pieces hung on his quarters walls, arranged in precise geometric patterns that would seem random to casual observers but revealed deep connections to those who understood what to look for. A Bajoran prayer mandala, concentric circles in deep purples and golds, the spiral pattern suggesting cyclical time and divine intervention. A Cardassian military commendation, harsh angles and aggressive symbolism proclaiming dominance through strength. A Klingon battle tapestry depicting the defense of QNOS against some ancient enemy, all fury and honor and glorious death. A Vulcan meditation sculpture, pure logic rendered in crystalline lattice work that caught light and refracted it into orderly patterns. A Ferengi profit margin chart framed as abstract art, because to them, commerce was beauty. And most intriguing, a Dominion propaganda piece acquired through back channels, showing the founders as benevolent gods bringing order to chaos, the Vorta as grateful servants, the Jem'Hadar as perfect warriors. The artistic style was unsettling in its sterility, everything rendered in smooth, flowing forms that suggested liquid rather than solid matter. Thrawn studied this last piece with particular intensity. The founders were changelings, like Odo. Shapeshifters who considered solids, humanoids with fixed forms, to be inferior. Their art reflected this philosophy, fluid superiority over rigid weakness, unity of purpose over chaotic individuality, the inevitable triumph of order imposed from above. They were autocrats who had elevated their own species to godhood and engineered servitor races to worship them. In another context, in another galaxy, Thrawn might have found common ground with such an efficient system. Order. Hierarchy. Purpose. But he'd seen the casualty reports in that cargo bay. He'd observed the fear in Bajoran eyes when Jem'Hadar attacked ships passed too close. The Dominion's order was built on subjugation, not governance. Slavery dressed as enlightenment. The Empire had been many things: brutal, authoritarian, willing to destroy planets that resisted, but it had never pretended its subjects were anything other than subjects. The Dominion's hypocrisy offended Thrawn's sensibilities more than its cruelty. His door chimed. Enter. Chief O'Brien stepped through, carrying a toolkit and wearing an expression of professional curiosity. Admiral. Captain Sisko asked me to check on your quarters, make sure the environmental controls are properly calibrated for Chiss physiology. A thoughtful gesture. Thrawn gestured to the art-covered walls. Though I suspect you're also here to observe how I spend my time. O'Brien had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Captain's a cautious man. Can't blame him, given what we're facing. Indeed not. Caution keeps commanders alive. Thrawn watched O'Brien's eyes scan the artwork, seeing the engineer's mental calculations as he tried to find patterns in the arrangement. Tell me, Chief, what do you see? A lot of expensive decoration for someone who just lost everything. Look deeper. Not at individual pieces. At the relationships between them. O'Brien frowned, studying the walls with greater attention. His gaze moved from the Bajoran mandala to the Cardassian commendation, then to the Klingon tapestry. They're all enemies. Or former enemies. Bajorans was occupied by Cardassia. The Klingon fought both of them at various points. You're mapping conflicts. Very good. And what does the arrangement tell you about the nature of those conflicts? The engineer stepped closer to the Vulcan sculpture, positioned between the Bajoran and Cardassian pieces. Vulcan logic as a buffer between Bajoran faith and Cardassian aggression. That's actually what happened historically. Vulcan diplomats helped negotiate the withdrawal. He turned to Thrawn, newfound respect in his eyes. You learned our political history from shopping for art. Art does not lie, Chief. Politics, intelligence reports, propaganda, all can be manipulated. But art reveals the soul of a culture. The Bajorans create circular, cyclical patterns because their faith is built on prophecy and eternal return. The Cardassians favor aggressive geometry because they view existence as conquest. The Klingons celebrate death in battle because they believe glory transcends mortality. Thrawn gestured to the Dominion propaganda. And the Founders create art that denies the very concept of individual identity because they themselves are a collective consciousness when joined in the Great Link. O'Brien approached the Dominion piece warily, as if it might attack him. That's Founder art. How'd you even get this? A Iridian trader in the lower promenade had acquired it during a salvage operation near the Badlands. He was eager to sell, apparently possessing Dominion artifacts makes one a target for both sides. Thrawn's expression darkened. Study it, Chief. This is how the Founders see themselves. Smooth, perfect, superior. And look at how they depict the Vorta and Jem'Hadar, smaller, positioned below, gazing upward in worship. The power dynamic is explicit. That's how all propaganda works, isn't it? Making yourself look good? No. Most propaganda exaggerates existing virtues or minimizes existing flaws. This piece doesn't exaggerate, it states literal belief. The Founders genuinely consider themselves gods. The Vorta genuinely worship them. The Jem'Hadar genuinely know nothing but service. Thrawn tapped the frame thoughtfully. Which means the Dominion's greatest strength is also its critical vulnerability. O'Brien's combadge chirped before he could respond. Ops to Chief O'Brien. We're detecting unusual energy fluctuations near the wormhole. Could be another anomaly. On my way. O'Brien paused at the door. Admiral, why are you helping us? Really? You don't owe us anything beyond basic gratitude. Thrawn considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. In my galaxy, I served the Empire because I believed order was preferable to chaos. I watched a republic collapse under its own corruption and welcomed the Emperor's vision of stability. He gestured to the artwork surrounding them. But here, I see something I never witnessed in my own time. Cultures maintaining distinct identities while cooperating toward common goals. Bajoran faith and Starfleet science. Klingon honor and Federation diplomacy. It should not work. Every strategic principle suggests such alliances fracture under pressure. But we're still standing. Precisely. Which means either my understanding of sociological dynamics is fundamentally flawed. Thrawn's eyes gleamed with intellectual hunger. Or your Federation has discovered something my Empire never achieved. I intend to determine which. O'Brien studied the Chiss for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Just so you know, we've got good people dying out there every day. If you're playing games while they're bleeding, I don't care how brilliant you are. I'll space you myself. I would expect nothing less, Chief. Thrawn's tone held genuine respect. That loyalty to your crew, that willingness to act on moral conviction despite personal cost, that is also revealed in your culture's art. It is why I believe you can win this war. After O'Brien left, Thrawn returned to studying the Dominion propaganda piece. The founders as gods. The servitor races as worshippers. A hierarchy so rigid it denied the possibility of growth or change. In the Empire, fear had maintained order. But fear required constant reinforcement, constant shows of power. The moment the Emperor died, the Empire began to fracture. The Dominion relied on religious devotion, more stable than fear, but just as brittle if the foundation cracked. The Vorta and Jem'Hadar had never been given a reason to question their gods. They'd never needed to. But what happened when gods proved fallible? Thrawn activated his borrowed computer terminal, fingers moving awkwardly across the unfamiliar interface. He needed to learn everything about the Dominion structure. Their supply lines, their political hierarchy, their cultural foundations. Not to destroy them through overwhelming force, but to understand them so completely that victory became inevitable. The founders considered themselves perfect. They'd built an empire on that assumption. Thrawn had defeated opponents who thought themselves invincible before. He knew their weakness, they never prepared for the impossible. His comm badge chirped. Captain Sisko's voice, Admiral Thrawn, please report to Ops. We have a situation developing. On my way, Captain. As he left his quarters, Thrawn cast one last glance at his gallery of understanding. 17 pieces of art. 17 windows into the souls of this universe's players. The game was beginning. And in games of strategy, the player who saw furthest won. The situation room adjacent to Ops was cramped with senior staff. Captain Sisko stood at the head of the tactical display, his expression grim. Major Kira occupied one side, arms crossed, while Odo loomed near the entrance like a sentinel. Commander Dax worked the computer console, her fingers dancing across controls that still felt alien to Thrawn's eyes. Chief O'Brien had returned from his visit to Thrawn's quarters, taking position near the engineering readouts. And in the center of the room, projected in crisp holographic detail, was a Vorta. Thrawn recognized the species immediately from the propaganda art he'd studied. Pale skin, violet eyes, graceful movements that suggested generations of genetic engineering toward aesthetic perfection. This particular Vorta wore robes of deep purple trimmed in silver, status markers, Thrawn noted, and smiled with the serene confidence of someone who believed themselves unassailably correct. I am Wayoun, representative of the Dominion, the hologram said, his voice smooth as polished duranium. I come with an offer of considerable value to both our peoples. We've heard your offers before, Sisko replied, voice flat. They always end with Federation worlds under Dominion occupation. Such hostility, Captain. I merely wish to discuss a matter of mutual interest. Wei Aun's smile never wavered. 3 days ago, a vessel of unknown origin emerged from the wormhole and was retrieved by your station. We detected its passage through the celestial temple. He used the Bajoran term with deliberate mockery, and noted its unusual energy signature. The Dominion is curious about your newest acquisition. Thrawn remained perfectly still, studying the Vorta's micro-expressions. The smile was practiced, almost mechanical. The eye movements followed predictable patterns. Left when accessing prepared statements, straight ahead when improvising. The hands gestured in flowing arcs that had been trained into muscle memory, designed to appear non-threatening while establishing dominance through calm assurance. This was a diplomat engineered for diplomacy. Every aspect optimized for persuasion and manipulation. Fascinating. What we do with refugees on our station is none of the Dominion's concern, Kira said sharply. Refugees? Wei Aun's eyebrows raised in perfect synchronization. How generous of you to provide sanctuary. Though I wonder if you fully assessed the risk. Unknown technology. Unknown capabilities. Unknown loyalties. His violet eyes seemed to look directly at Thrawn despite the holographic transmission. The Founders, in their infinite wisdom, have authorized me to make a proposal. Turn over this refugee and his crew to Dominion custody, and we will guarantee the safety of Deep Space Nine for one full rotation. No attacks. No incursions. Your station removed from our immediate strategic priorities. You want to buy him, Dak said, understanding dawning. Like a commodity. We prefer to think of it as preventing a potential threat from destabilizing the region further. Wei Aun's tone remained pleasant. After all, Captain Sisko, how well do you truly know this? What did you call him? Grand Admiral. Such a grandiose title for someone who arrived with no fleet, no empire, no power base. The Vorta clasped his hands together. Or perhaps he does have power. Perhaps his technology represents an advantage you hope to leverage against the Dominion. In which case, we are prepared to negotiate for shared access. Denied, Sisko cut him off. The Dominion has always found the Federation's moral rigidity quaint. Very well. I shall relay your refusal to the Founders. The transmission ended. The hologram dissolved into empty air. For a moment, silence filled the situation room. Then Kira turned to Sisko. They know about Thrawn. Which means they've been monitoring our communications more closely than we thought. Or they have assets on the station we haven't identified, Odo growled. I'll intensify security sweeps. Thrawn waited until all eyes turned to him before speaking. They do not know about me. They know I exist. The distinction matters. Care to explain? Sisko asked. Wei Aun's offer was reconnaissance disguised as negotiation. He was testing your response to determine my value. Thrawn moved to the tactical display, studying the Dominion force deployments marked in red across the star map. His approach contained 4 distinct probes. First, offering protection in exchange for my person reveals they believe I represent strategic value but are uncertain of the specifics. Second, the mention of unknown technology suggests their sensors detected Imperial systems but could not identify them. Third, proposing shared access indicates they would prefer cooperation over conflict. They are not confident they can simply take me by force. Fourth, the emotional manipulation, moving from friendly to wounded, tests Captain Sisko's susceptibility to guilt and moral appeals. O'Brien shook his head in grudging admiration. You got all that from one conversation. I got that from what he chose not to say, Chief. Wei Aun never asked my name. Never inquired about my species or origin. Never mentioned the destroyed vessel, which their ship certainly detected breaking apart near the wormhole. These omissions tell me the Dominion is conducting parallel intelligence gathering. They are asking questions through other channels while using this diplomatic overture to measure your reactions. Dax leaned forward, intrigued. What other channels? The Cardassians. Thrawn gestured to the map, where Cardassian holdings appeared in amber, intertwined with Dominion red. Your former occupiers maintain extensive intelligence networks throughout this sector. They know Bajoran culture, Federation procedures, station operations, knowledge the Dominion lacks. Weyoun's superiors would be foolish not to leverage that expertise. Kira's jaw tightened. You're saying Cardassia is feeding the Dominion information about you? I am saying it is the logical move. And if I have learned anything from studying your cultures through art, it is that Cardassians prize logic almost as much as Vulcans. They simply apply it toward conquest rather than philosophy. Thrawn traced a line on the display from Deep Space Nine toward Cardassian space. If I were coordinating Dominion intelligence operations, would task the Cardassians with identifying my capabilities while the Vorta distract you with diplomatic theater. Sisko studied the map, his expression darkening with each passing second. You're suggesting they're running a multi-layered operation. I am suggesting they already are. The question is whether you wish to respond reactively or proactively. And what would a proactive response look like to you, Admiral? Thrawn's red eyes gleamed. This was the moment, the point where he would either be trusted as an advisor or dismissed as an outsider. It would involve giving the Dominion exactly what they want, Captain. But not in the way they expect. Odo's features shifted with suspicion. You want us to hand you over? No. I want you to let them believe they can take me. There is a significant difference. Thrawn magnified a section of the map showing Dominion patrol routes near the Badlands. The Vorta's offer of protection was genuine. They will honor the agreement if you accept it. But their intelligence gathering will not stop. They will continue probing, continue testing, continue searching for vulnerabilities. This consumes resources and attention. So? Kira demanded. So we exploit their curiosity. We provide carefully curated intelligence that answers some questions while raising others. We allow them to discover information about Imperial technology that makes them cautious rather than aggressive. We position me as a prize valuable enough to pursue but dangerous enough to approach carefully. Thrawn's hands moved over the tactical display, highlighting positions with practiced precision. And while the Dominion focuses on acquiring or neutralizing me, we identify their intelligence networks, map their decision-making hierarchies, and learn who among the founders is directing this operation. The room fell silent. Sisko exchanged glances with his senior staff, Kira skeptical, Dax intrigued, O'Brien wary, Odo calculating. You want to use yourself as bait, Sisko said finally. I want to use their perception of me as bait. I have no intention of actually being captured. Thrawn turned from the display, meeting Sisko's eyes directly. Captain, in my galaxy I defeated enemies with superior numbers, superior technology, and superior position. I did so by understanding what they valued and manipulating that value into vulnerability. The Dominion values order, hierarchy, and genetic perfection. They see chaos as weakness. So we give them chaos, controlled, directed chaos that appears random but follows precise orchestration. That's dangerous, O'Brien said. One miscalculation and you're in a Dominion interrogation facility. One miscalculation and this war continues consuming your ships and personnel until the Federation capitulates or collapses. Thrawn's tone remained even, but his words cut like vibroblades. I have studied your casualty reports, Chief. Starfleet is bleeding. Your production cannot match the Dominion's. Your alliances with the Klingon and Romulans are marriages of convenience that will fracture the moment the immediate threat passes. You are fighting a war of attrition you cannot win through conventional strategy. So your solution is deception and manipulation, Kira said, disgust evident. How very Cardassian of you. Major, the Cardassians occupied your world for 50 years. Did righteous anger liberate Bajorans? Kira's hand moved toward her phaser. Odo tensed. But Sisko raised a hand, forestalling violence. Stand down, Major. The captain's voice carried command weight. To Thrawn, you're making a point. Make it clearly. Bajorans was freed through a combination of factors: Cardassian overextension, political pressure from the Federation, and yes, the courage of the resistance. But the final withdrawal came because the Cardassians calculated that maintaining the occupation cost more than it was worth. Someone changed their cost-benefit analysis. Thrawn's gaze swept the room. I am proposing we do the same to the Dominion. Not through direct military confrontation, but by making their strategic objectives more expensive, more complicated, more uncertain than they can afford. Dax spoke up, her voice thoughtful. You're talking about asymmetric warfare. Hitting them where they don't expect it, forcing them to defend everything instead of attacking freely. Precisely, Commander. The Dominion's strength is centralized command. The Founders make decisions. The Vorta implement them. The Jem'Hadar execute them. This creates efficiency but also rigidity. If we introduce sufficient complexity into their decision-making environment, we slow their response cycles. We make them cautious. We force them to question their own intelligence. Sisko walked to the viewport, looking out at the wormhole's distant gleam. The Celestial Temple. The passage that had brought both prophecy and invasion to Bajorans. When he turned back, his expression was carefully neutral. I need to think about this, Admiral. What you're proposing goes against Starfleet protocols. We don't use deception as a primary strategic tool. No, Thrawn agreed. You use it through your Section 31 while maintaining public deniability. You compromise your principles in shadows while pretending the light remains clean. The accusation hung in the air like a photon torpedo waiting to detonate. You've been here 3 days, Sisko said quietly, dangerously. And you think you understand us? I understand that every civilization at war faces the same choice, Captain. Principles or survival. The Empire chose survival and built a tyranny. Your Federation tries to choose both and splits itself between ideal and reality. Thrawn's voice softened slightly. I am not judging you. I am offering to be the instrument that lets you act without compromising your public values. Let me be the deception. Let me be the manipulation. And when history judges this war, your hands can remain as clean as possible. Kira laughed bitterly. You're offering to be our deniable asset. Our own personal Section 31 operative. I am offering to win you this war, Major. The method is negotiable. The outcome should not be. Sisko's combadge chirped. Ops to Captain Sisko. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Ross is requesting immediate secure communication. On my way. Sisko moved toward the door, then paused. Admiral Thrawn, you'll remain on the station under current security protocols. We'll discuss your proposal after I've consulted with my superiors. Of course, Captain. After the senior staff filed out, Thrawn remained alone in the Situation Room, studying the tactical display. Dominion red spreading like infection across the map. Federation blue holding positions but slowly contracting. Klingon green striking aggressively but taking unsustainable losses. Romulan purple lurking at the edges, waiting to see which side would prevail before committing fully. A galaxy at war. Different technologies, different species, different philosophies. But war itself. War was universal. And Thrawn had never lost a campaign where he controlled the intelligence environment. The Dominion wanted him. Very well. He would ensure they continued wanting him. Right up until the moment their desire became their downfall. The USS Defiant cut through space at high warp, its compact hull vibrating with barely contained power. Thrawn stood in the rear of the bridge, positioned where he could observe without interfering, a courtesy extended by Captain Sisko after Starfleet Command had approved a limited operational trial of the Chiss Admiral's strategic recommendations. Limited. Conditional. Revocable at the first sign of deception. Thrawn appreciated the Federation's caution. It was far more rational than blind trust would have been. Approaching the Korma Pass, Lieutenant Commander Worf announced from tactical, his Klingon features set in their habitual stern expression. Dropping to impulse in 30 seconds. The Korma Pass, a narrow corridor of navigable space between two massive ion storms that raged perpetually in the Badlands. Dominion supply convoys used it to move Ketracellite shipments from their replicator facilities in the Calandra sector to forward operating bases near Cardassian space. Starfleet had attempted 3 previous raids on these convoys. All 3 had ended in heavy casualties when Jem'Hadar reinforcements arrived faster than intelligence projections suggested possible. Thrawn had studied the after-action reports with considerable interest. The pattern was clear. Someone was feeding the Dominion advance warning of Federation attack plans. A spy, a compromised communication channel, or simply predictable Federation tactics that allowed the enemy to preposition forces. He'd proposed this 4th raid specifically to test which hypothesis was correct. Sensor readings? Sisko asked, settling into the command chair with practiced ease. 2 Jem'Hadar attack ships escorting a Cardassian freighter, Dax reported from the science station. Match the intelligence profile exactly. The freighter's shields are minimal, they're relying on the escorts for protection. Just like the last 3 times, Chief O'Brien muttered from engineering. Feels like déjà vu. Because it is intended to, Chief, Thrawn said quietly. All heads turned toward him. He gestured to the tactical display where the Dominion convoy appeared as red icons against the star field. The Dominion knows you raid their supply lines. They have adjusted by making their convoys appear vulnerable while ensuring rapid response forces lurk just beyond sensor range. When you engage the escorts, reinforcements arrive and overwhelm you. Worf's hand moved closer to the weapons controls. Then this is a trap. Every military operation is a trap for someone, Commander. The question is whether you are the prey or the predator. Thrawn moved to stand beside Sisko's chair, careful not to position himself in a way that could be interpreted as challenging the captain's authority. I propose we spring their trap. But on our terms. Sisko studied him for a moment, then nodded fractionally. You have tactical command for this engagement, Admiral. But if I see anything that looks like betrayal, you will destroy this ship with all hands rather than allow it to fall to the Dominion. Yes, Captain. Your Starfleet self-destruct protocols are admirably uncompromising. Thrawn turned to Worf. Commander, arm all weapons but do not raise shields. I want them to believe we are approaching exactly as we did in previous raids. Worf's jaw tightened, but he complied. Weapons armed. Shields down. Dax, continuous active sensor sweeps. I want them to know we see them. That's the opposite of tactical doctrine, Dax said, but her fingers were already adjusting the sensor protocols. We're announcing our presence. Precisely. The Dominion expects you to try stealth. When you don't, their tactical officers will experience a moment of cognitive dissonance, their predictions do not match observed behavior. That moment of uncertainty is exploitable. Thrawn watched the tactical display with absolute focus. Chief O'Brien, prepare to redirect all power from life support to engines on my mark. That'll give us maybe 3 minutes of breathable air, O'Brien warned. It will give us velocity. Which is more important in the next 3 minutes than oxygen. Thrawn's eyes never left the display. Captain Sisko, please open a channel to the convoy. All frequencies. Sisko gestured to Dax, who activated communications with a quizzical expression. Channel open. Thrawn spoke clearly, his accent giving the words an exotic formality. Dominion vessels, this is Grand Admiral Thrawn aboard the Federation starship Defiant. I am transmitting my personal identification codes on Imperial encrypted frequencies. Verify them, and you will understand what I represent. I am willing to negotiate defection in exchange for safe passage to Founder space. The bridge erupted in shocked silence. What are you? Kira began, rising from her seat. Sisko raised a hand sharply. Belay that, Major. Let him finish. The second stretched. On the tactical display, the Dominion convoy altered course slightly, moving into a defensive posture but not immediately attacking. Thrawn could almost see the calculations happening on the enemy bridge: confusion, opportunity assessment, communication with higher authority. Then, as predicted, Avorta's face appeared on the view screen. Not Weyoun, but another of the same genetic line. Identical features, identical smile, identical practice serenity. Grand Admiral, the Vorta said smoothly. I am Weyoun 5. How unexpected to hear from you. Though I must confess, I question the sincerity of your offer given your current companionship. The Federation saved my life, Weyoun. I am grateful. But gratitude is not loyalty. Thrawn gestured around the Defiance bridge with deliberate theatricality. I have studied this universe for days now. The Federation fights for principles it cannot afford. The Dominion fights for order it has already achieved. I am a military strategist. I serve order over chaos. Surely you understand the logic of my position. Weyoun's smile widened. The Founders will be most interested in speaking with you. Though I wonder why you contact us now, during what appears to be a raid on our convoy. Because, Weyoun, I needed to demonstrate my value. And because the Federation needed to believe this offer was made under battlefield duress rather than calculated betrayal. Thrawn paused precisely 3 seconds. Shields up. Evasive pattern Thrawn Alpha 1. All power to engines. Execute now. The Defiant lurched forward as O'Brien rerouted power with engineer's instinct. Shields snapped into place microseconds before Jem'Hadar Polaron beams slashed through the space they'd occupied. The starship spun through a corkscrew maneuver no Federation tactical computer would ever calculate, its trajectory seemingly random but following precise geometric patterns Thrawn had plotted based on the ion storm interference patterns. Firing quantum torpedoes. Worf announced, his earlier skepticism replaced with warrior's focus. Torpedoes streaked toward the convoy, but not at the escorts. At the freighter. The Cardassian ship's minimal shields collapsed under the first impact. The second and third torpedoes punched through the hull in precise locations that Thrawn had calculated would breach the cargo holds without destroying the entire vessel. The Ketracel White? Sisko asked. Venting into space as we speak, Captain. The Jem'Hadar reinforcements will arrive in approximately 40 seconds to find their critical supply shipment contaminated by vacuum exposure. Ketracel White is chemically unstable when frozen. It will take them weeks to synthesize replacement quantities. New contacts. Dax called out. 8 Jem'Hadar attack ships dropping out of warp, exactly where you said they'd be. Of course they are. The Dominion prepositions forces in the second ion storm, using its interference to mask their warp signatures. A clever tactic. Thrawn watched the reinforcements begin their attack run. Helm, come about to heading 047 Mark III. Maximum impulse directly into the ion storm's densest region. That's suicide, Kira protested. Our shields will collapse in that interference. So will theirs. But we know we are flying into a storm. They are pursuing us into one. Desperation versus calculation, Major. Very different tactical positions. Thrawn's voice remained utterly calm as Defiant plunged into raging ionic chaos. The view screen filled with purple and blue energy discharges, the ship shaking as charged particles hammered against shields already strained by the maneuver. Shields at 60%, Worf reported. 50. 40. Maintain course, Thrawn said. The Jem'Hadar are trained to be fearless, which makes them predictable. They will follow us. Confirmed, Dax said, hands gripping her console as the ship bucked. 6 attack ships entering the storm. Wait, their shields are collapsing faster than ours. The interference is affecting their Polaron generators differently than our deflector grid. Dominion technology evolved in the Gamma Quadrant, where ion storms are less common. Their shields are optimized for different stellar environments. Thrawn gestured to the helm. Prepare for full stop on my mark. Transfer all shield power to forward deflectors. They'll flank us, Worf objected. No, Commander. Their formation discipline will require them to match our vector to avoid collisions in the interference. When we stop, they will overshoot. We will then have a targeting solution on their sterns, the weakest point of Jem'Hadar ship architecture. Thrawn counted silently, eyes tracking the tactical projections. Mark. Defiance impulse engines reversed thrust so violently the inertial dampeners screamed in protest. The crew lurched forward against their restraints as the ship arrested its momentum in a maneuver that would have shattered a less robust vessel. 6 Jem'Hadar attack ships shot past, exactly as predicted, their formations momentarily disrupted by the unexpected tactic. Fire all weapons, Thrawn commanded. Worf's hands moved across his console with Klingon precision. Phasers and quantum torpedoes launched in a coordinated barrage that would have been impossible without the perfect positioning Thrawn's maneuver had created. 3 Jem'Hadar ships exploded immediately, their warp cores breaching. The other 3 sustained heavy damage, shields failing, systems offline. Helm, exit the storm on heading 173 Mark 9. Maximum warp the instant we're clear. Defiance surged out of the ion storm like a predator emerging from shadow, already accelerating to warp speed before the surviving Jem'Hadar ships could reorient. Within seconds, the Badlands and the crippled convoy were light years behind them. The bridge was silent except for the hum of systems and the quiet breathing of the crew. Sisko stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Report. 3 Jem'Hadar attack ships destroyed, 3 disabled, Ketracel-White shipment destroyed, 0 casualties to Defiant, Worf said, and there was something almost like approval in his tone. It was an honorable victory. Honorable? Kira turned on Thrawn. You told the Dominion you were defecting. You made them think you were betraying us. I made them think I was considering betrayal, Major. There is a critical difference. Thrawn clasped his hands behind his back, returning to his position at the rear of the bridge. The Vorta needed to believe my offer was credible enough to delay their attack while they contacted higher authority. That delay gave us positioning advantage. Additionally, Wayound 5 will now report to the Founders that I attempted defection, which means the Dominion will expend resources trying to facilitate future contact. Resources not devoted to attacking Federation positions. You played both sides, O'Brien said slowly. Made the Dominion think you wanted to join them while using that deception to win the battle. Yes, Chief. It is called multi-level strategic manipulation. The Empire taught me well. Thrawn met Sisko's gaze directly. I warned you, Captain, that my methods would challenge Federation sensibilities. If you wish to terminate our arrangement, I will accept confinement. But the Ketracel-White shipment is destroyed, the Jem'Hadar forces in this sector are weakened, and the Dominion now has reason to doubt their intelligence predictions. Tactically, the mission succeeded. Sisko was quiet for a long moment, studying the Chiss Admiral with the intensity of a man trying to see through layers of deception to the truth beneath. Finally, he spoke. Mr. Worf, set course for Deep Space Nine. Standard warp. Admiral Thrawn, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about acceptable tactics and operational boundaries. Of course, Captain. As Defiant jumped to warp, Thrawn allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The Federation had rigid principles, yes. But they were learning to be flexible. And flexibility, in war, was the difference between survival and extinction. The intelligence briefing room on Deep Space Nine was deliberately nondescript: gray walls, minimal furnishings, no windows. Nothing to distract from the task of analyzing threats and planning responses. Thrawn sat at the conference table surrounded by data isolinear chips, tactical displays, and art pieces he'd requested from the station's cargo bay storage. Captain Sisko had granted him limited access to Starfleet intelligence archives following the successful Korma Pass raid. Limited, but sufficient. 3 weeks of intensive study had yielded a comprehensive understanding of the Dominion's operational patterns, leadership structure, and strategic vulnerabilities. But it was the art that told him how to win. On the wall before him hung a Vorta devotional painting recovered from a destroyed Dominion installation. It depicted a founder in liquid form, surrounded by Vorta in poses of worship, their faces ecstatic with religious fervor. The brushwork was technically proficient but emotionally hollow, beauty without soul, devotion without choice. Beside it, a Jem'Hadar ceremonial blade etched with script that translated roughly to, "Victory is life." The etching style was aggressive, angular, designed to be read quickly in the chaos of battle. No artistry for its own sake. Only function. Only purpose. And finally, a propaganda hologram showing the Founder's Great Link. Hundreds of changelings merging into a golden ocean of collective consciousness. The image pulsed with hypnotic rhythm, designed to evoke awe and submission in viewer species. Thrawn had studied these pieces for hours, cross-referencing them with tactical reports, intercepted communications, and behavioral analyses. The pattern was crystallizing. The door opened. Odo entered, his changeling features set in their perpetual expression of skeptical disapproval. "You requested to see me, Admiral." "Thank you for coming, Constable." Thrawn gestured to the seat across from him. "I need your insight on a matter of considerable delicacy." Odo remained standing. "If this is about my being a changeling, I've heard every question and suspicion already. I am not a founder. I do not share their genocidal philosophy. I chose to remain with the solids. I know. Your service record speaks to your loyalty." Thrawn indicated the propaganda hologram of the Great Link. "But you were once part of that, weren't you? Before you were sent out as an infant to explore the galaxy. Before you knew what you were." Odo's expression tightened. "What's your point?" "My point, Constable, is that you are the only person in this quadrant who can explain something that has puzzled me since I first studied Dominion tactics." Thrawn stood, moving to the hologram. "The Founders are shapeshifters. They can become anyone, infiltrate anywhere, gather intelligence through perfect mimicry. They should be invincible as intelligence operatives. Yet the Federation continues to detect infiltrators. You continue to expose them. Why? Because I know how changelings think. No. Because you know how they feel." Thrawn turned to face Odo directly. "The Founders believe themselves superior to solids. This belief is not merely intellectual, it is emotional, instinctive, woven into their very sense of identity. When a changeling imitates a solid, they are forcing themselves into a form they consider inferior. This creates psychological stress. And that stress manifests in subtle behavioral patterns." Odo said nothing, but his silence was confirmation. "You are different, Constable. You lived as a solid for years before discovering your true nature. You formed relationships with solids. You learned to value their perspectives. When you take humanoid form, you are not imitating something inferior, you are choosing to be part of a community you respect." Thrawn's red eyes gleamed with understanding. "The Founders cannot do this. Their superiority complex prevents them from truly becoming their disguises. They can mimic appearance perfectly, but not psychology. You're saying their arrogance is a vulnerability. I am saying their entire strategic architecture is built on a foundation that denies the validity of non-changeling perspectives. And that denial creates exploitable blind spots. Thrawn returned to his seat, gesturing for Odo to join him. This time, the changeling sat. Explain. Thrawn activated a tactical display showing Dominion force deployments across the Alpha Quadrant. Every military force projects its cultural values onto its strategic doctrine. The Klingon favor aggressive frontal assault because they value honor in direct combat. The Romulans prefer ambush and misdirection because they value cunning over brute force. The Federation employs defensive perimeters and diplomatic solutions because they value life preservation and peaceful resolution. And the Dominion? The Dominion employs overwhelming force through genetically engineered servitor species because the Founders refuse to risk themselves in direct combat. They command from safety, send others to die, and maintain control through religious manipulation. Thrawn highlighted specific battle patterns. Notice how Jem'Hadar tactics never include retreat, never include independent tactical adjustment, never include questioning orders even when those orders are clearly flawed. Odo leaned forward, studying the data. They're trained to obey without thinking. Which makes them superb soldiers but poor warriors. They cannot adapt. They cannot improvise. They execute their programming flawlessly, but when confronted with situations outside their programming, they default to aggression. Thrawn pulled up after-action reports from a dozen engagements. In 73% of encounters where Federation forces employed unexpected tactics, Jem'Hadar response time increased by an average of 4.2 seconds. In combat, that delay is fatal. You're proposing we exploit their rigidity. I am proposing something far more comprehensive, Constable. Thrawn deactivated the tactical display and turned his attention to the Vorta devotional painting. The Dominion's strength is its hierarchy. Founders command. Vorta manage. Jem'Hadar execute. This structure is efficient when all components function as designed. But what happens when one component begins to malfunction? Odo's eyes narrowed. You want to sever the chain of command. I want to introduce doubt into a system built on absolute certainty. Thrawn stood, approaching the painting. His fingers traced the air centimeters from the canvas, following the lines of Vorta worship. The Vorta are genetically engineered to revere the Founders. Their devotion is biochemical, coded into their neurology. They cannot question their gods any more than a human can choose to stop breathing. So how do you make them doubt? You don't make them doubt the Founders. You make them doubt each other. Thrawn's smile was cold and precise. The Vorta are clones, Constable. Wayound 5, Wayound 6, identical genetic templates activated as needed. But clones are not perfect copies of consciousness. Each iteration experiences different events, makes different decisions, forms different neural pathways. They are genetically identical but experientially unique. Understanding dawned in Odo's expression. You want to turn them against each other. I want to exploit the inevitable friction between iterations that believe themselves to be the same but are, in fact, diverging with every decision they make independently. Thrawn pulled up intelligence reports on Vorta leadership. Wayound 5 coordinates military operations in this sector. But he answers to other Vorta who manage different aspects of Dominion governance. They compete for Founder favor. They pursue different strategic priorities. And because they all believe themselves to be perfectly loyal, they cannot conceive that their competition might be exploitable. Odo stood, his form shifting slightly as emotion affected his concentration. This is dangerous, Admiral. If the Founders discover you're manipulating their command structure, they will eliminate the perceived threat with overwhelming force. Yes. Which is why the manipulation must appear to originate from within Dominion hierarchy, not from external agents. Thrawn turned to face Odo fully. I need your help, Constable. Your understanding of changeling psychology. Your insight into how founders think and feel and make decisions. Why would I help you manipulate people who share my species? Because those people are not your family, Odo. Your family is here, Captain Sisko, Major Kira, Chief O'Brien. The people you chose to stand beside when you could have returned to the Great Link. Thrawn's voice softened, just slightly. I am not asking you to betray your species. I am asking you to save the species you have chosen to protect. The solids. Your friends. Odo was silent for a long moment, internal conflict evident in the subtle shifts of his features. Finally, he spoke. What do you need from me? Information. About how the founders communicate with their Vorta administrators. About the protocols they use to issue commands. About the behavioral patterns that indicate a founder is present versus a Vorta acting on previous orders. Thrawn returned to his seat, pulling up encrypted data files. I have intercepted Dominion communications, but I lack context to interpret them accurately. You can provide that context. And if I do? What's your plan? To introduce carefully crafted intelligence into Dominion command channels. Information that appears to come from founder sources but actually originates from our operations. Information that creates conflicting priorities between Vorta administrators, making them compete for resources and recognition. Information that slowly, incrementally, teaches the Jem'Hadar that different Vorta give different orders, and that perhaps those orders are not equally valid. Odo absorbed this, his expression grave. You're trying to fracture their faith. I am trying to introduce the possibility of doubt into a system that has never experienced it. The Dominion has conquered through certainty, the Jem'Hadar are certain of their purpose, the Vorta are certain of their gods, the founders are certain of their superiority. But certainty is brittle, Constable. Certainty shatters when reality contradicts belief. And you think you can create that contradiction? Thrawn gestured to the art surrounding them, the devotional painting, the ceremonial blade, the propaganda hologram. Art reveals the soul of a culture, Odo. The Dominion's art reveals worship without choice, purpose without meaning, perfection without growth. These are not strengths. They are vulnerabilities masquerading as virtues. And I have spent my career turning enemy strengths into weaknesses. The changeling studied Thrawn for a long, measuring moment. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down fully, his posture shifting from confrontational to collaborative. Show me what you've intercepted. I'll tell you what it means. Thrawn activated the files, and together they began the painstaking work of psychological warfare, the kind fought not with weapons, but with words, symbols, and the careful manipulation of belief. Outside the briefing room, the war continued. Ships died. Planets fell. Soldiers fought and bled for causes they believed in. But in this small, gray room, two beings from different universes plotted a different kind of victory. One that would not be won in a day, or a week, or even a month. But when it came, it would strike at the very foundation of everything the Dominion believed itself to be. And foundations, once cracked, could not easily be repaired. The founder known as Odo's counterpart materialized on the view screen, her features shifting from humanoid approximation to something more fluid, more alien. She sat in what appeared to be a chamber aboard a Dominion warship, surrounded by Vorta attendants who stood at rigid attention. Captain Sisko kept his expression neutral, but Thrawn could read the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightening around his eyes. This was no ordinary diplomatic contact. The founders rarely communicated directly with Federation leadership. When they did, it meant something had changed in the strategic calculus. Captain Sisko, the female founder said, her voice carrying the strange harmonics of someone who didn't truly possess vocal cords in the traditional sense. I am told you harbor a most interesting individual on your station. One who claims to be a Grand Admiral from a galaxy that does not exist in our cosmological records. I harbor refugees who arrived through the wormhole, Sisko replied carefully. The Federation does not discriminate based on origin. How noble. And how convenient that this particular refugee possesses strategic knowledge that has allowed you to disrupt 3 of our supply convoys in the past month. The Founder's eyes, currently configured as vaguely humanoid, fixed on the camera with predatory intensity. 4. If we count the incident at Korma Pass where your mysterious admiral attempted to contact my Vorta with an offer of defection. Thrawn stood in the shadows beyond the viewscreen's pickup range, observing. Sisko had insisted he remain out of sight for this conversation, a reasonable precaution given the complexity of the situation. If you're accusing us of conducting military operations during wartime, Sisko said, then yes, we're guilty. That's what war means. War has rules, Captain. Conventions. Even between enemies, there exists a framework of acceptable conduct. The Founder leaned forward slightly. But your Grand Admiral operates outside those frameworks, doesn't he? Deception. Manipulation. False offers of betrayal designed to create confusion and delay. These are not Federation tactics. They're effective tactics. They are Cardassian tactics. Romulan tactics. The methods of species who value cunning over honor, victory over principle. The Founder's tone carried something that might have been disappointment. I had thought better of the Federation, Captain Sisko. I had thought your precious principles meant something. But it seems, when pressed, you are no different than the empires you claim to oppose. Thrawn filed the psychological manipulation away for analysis. The Founder was attempting to leverage Sisko's moral framework against him, creating guilt and doubt. A sophisticated approach. Sisko's jaw tightened. You're trying to make me feel guilty for defending my people against an invasion force. That's rich, coming from someone whose military doctrine includes genocide. We seek order, Captain. The Alpha Quadrant has existed in chaos for too long, petty conflicts between short-lived species who barely understand the consequences of their actions. We offer stability. Purpose. A place in the Dominion where every species knows its role and fulfills it without the wasteful confusion of democracy and debate. You offer slavery. We offer certainty. And your Federation's alliance with this Grand Admiral demonstrates that you understand, perhaps subconsciously, that certainty is preferable to your current trajectory. The Founder's features shifted subtly, becoming more angular. Allow me to make you an offer, Captain. One I do not extend lightly. Surrender the Grand Admiral to Dominion custody. In exchange, I will guarantee that Deep Space Nine and the Bajoran system will be excluded from military operations for 6 months. Your people, your station, your profits, all protected. All safe. We've been offered variations of that deal before. The answer is still no. Even when refusal means continued bloodshed. Even when Starfleet loses ships weekly, bases monthly, entire systems quarterly. The Founder tilted her head in an eerily bird-like gesture. Captain, I have studied your psychological profile. You are a pragmatist beneath the idealist veneer. A man who makes hard choices when necessary. You bombed a planet to stop the Maquis. You poisoned an entire biosphere to capture one man. Do not pretend you are bound by rigid morality when expedience serves. Thrawn saw Sisko's hands grip the armrests of his command chair. The Founder had done her research. She knew which pressure points to apply. Those situations were different, Sisko said, voice tight. Were they? Or is the only difference that this time, the morally questionable choice happens to align with Federation strategic interests? The Founder smiled, a disturbing expression on features not truly designed for it. Keep your Grand Admiral, Captain. Use his methods. Win your little tactical victories. But understand that every time you employ deception, every time you manipulate truth to serve strategic ends, you become more like us. More like the Cardassians. More like every empire that ever sacrificed principle for power. This conversation is over. One final point, Captain. The Founder's tone shifted, becoming almost conversational. Your Grand Admiral attempted to contact us at Korma Pass. He offered defection. We have no reason to believe that offer was entirely fabricated. After all, what loyalty does he owe to a federation he encountered mere weeks ago? What prevents him from concluding that the Dominion represents the same order and stability his empire once provided? The implication hung in the air like a photon charge waiting to detonate. Thrawn has proven himself, Sisko said, but Thrawn could hear the thread of uncertainty. Has he? Or has he simply demonstrated an ability to tell you what you wish to hear while serving his own agenda? The Founder stood, her form rippling slightly. Think carefully about who you trust, Captain. In war, the enemy at your gates is dangerous. But the enemy whispering in your ear is fatal. The transmission ended. Sisko sat motionless for a long moment before speaking. She's trying to drive a wedge between us. Create suspicion. Yes, Thrawn said, stepping into the viewscreen's light. And she is doing so because our collaboration represents a threat she cannot easily counter. The Founders prefer overwhelming force and religious certainty. Psychological manipulation is more difficult for them because it requires understanding individual psychology, something they find distasteful. She seemed pretty good at manipulation to me. She was competent. But she made critical errors. Thrawn moved to Sisko's tactical display, calling up the recording of the conversation. Notice here, when she references your past actions against the Maquis, she expects guilt and defensiveness. Instead, she receives acknowledgement without apology. This confuses her strategic model. She anticipated self-doubt, not pragmatic acceptance. Sisko studied the replay. She's used to dealing with people who apologize for doing what's necessary. Precisely. The Founders cultivate self-doubt in their opponents, making them question their own decisions and values. But you are not vulnerable to that particular manipulation, Captain. You've already made peace with the morally ambiguous choices leadership requires. Thrawn paused the recording on the Founder's face. However, she did succeed in planting one seed of doubt. About you. About me, Thrawn confirmed. She is correct that my loyalty to the Federation is circumstantial rather than ideological. I serve you because our strategic interests align, not because I share your principles. If I concluded the Dominion represented a better vehicle for achieving order and stability, logic would suggest I should switch allegiances. Should I be concerned? Thrawn turned from the display to face Sisko directly. Captain, I will be honest with you as I always have been. The Dominion represents everything I once served in the Empire: hierarchy, order, purpose enforced from above. There is a certain elegance to their system. A certain efficiency. Sisko's hand moved subtly toward his phaser. But, Thrawn continued, the Dominion also represents something the Empire never did. The Empire was human supremacist and authoritarian, yes. But it did not pretend to be anything else. The Founders, by contrast, have built their empire on a lie, that their rule is divinely ordained, that their servitor species worship them by choice, that order imposed through religious manipulation is somehow more legitimate than order imposed through acknowledged force. You object to their hypocrisy, not their methods. I object to inefficiency, Captain. And the Dominion structure is profoundly inefficient. They have engineered the Jem'Hadar to be dependent on Ketracel White, creating a logistical vulnerability where none needed to exist. They clone the Vorta endlessly rather than training diverse administrators with unique perspectives. They refuse to risk themselves in combat, ensuring their strategic decisions are made by individuals with no personal understanding of battlefield realities. Thrawn gestured to the frozen image of the female Founder. This is not order. This is control. And control without flexibility is brittle. Sisko relaxed fractionally. So you're not planning to defect. I am planning to defeat them, Captain. Which requires that I understand them completely, their strengths, their weaknesses, their cultural foundations. The founder who contacted you believes she was undermining our alliance. In fact, she was providing me with valuable intelligence about Dominion strategic thinking. Thrawn pulled up additional files. She confirmed that the founders are aware of my defection offer at Korma Pass, which means they are monitoring Vorta communications more closely than I anticipated. She revealed that she personally views psychological manipulation as a viable tactic, suggesting individual founders have different operational preferences. And she demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature by expecting guilt where you exhibit pragmatism. You're analyzing her the way you analyze art. Because she is art, Captain. A shapeshifter who chooses this particular form, this particular voice, these particular mannerisms, every choice reveals psychology. She wants to appear reasonable, even sympathetic. She positions the Dominion as providers of stability rather than conquerors. This suggests she believes the Federation can be convinced to surrender rather than defeated militarily. Thrawn's red eyes gleamed. She is wrong. But her belief in her own persuasive abilities is exploitable. Sisko stood, walking to the viewport where stars gleamed against the void. Admiral, I'm going to ask you a direct question. And I need a direct answer. Of course. If you had to choose, right now, forced decision, between the Federation winning this war or the Dominion winning this war, which would you choose? Thrawn considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I would choose the Federation, Captain. Not because I believe in your principles, but because a Dominion victory would mean the calcification of a fundamentally flawed system across the entire Alpha Quadrant. The Federation, for all its contradictions and moral struggles, allows for growth. For change. For the possibility that better systems might evolve. He paused. The empire I served became stagnant. It stopped adapting. And when the emperor died, it collapsed because no one had been permitted to develop the leadership capabilities to continue his vision. I will not serve another empire that mistakes control for strength. That's a long way of saying you're on our side. I am on the side of strategic stability and long-term viability, Captain. Which currently means ensuring Dominion defeat. Thrawn returned his attention to the tactical displays. Now, shall we discuss how to use the Founder's psychological manipulation attempt against her? Sisko smiled grimly. I'm listening. And in the cold mathematics of war, in the careful calibration of trust and betrayal, two very different men found common ground. Not in shared values. But in shared enemies. The Cardassian sensor technician detected the anomaly 3 minutes before his superior officer would have noticed. A small victory, considering his superior had been monitoring Dominion operations for 2 decades while he'd only held the post for 6 months. Gul Ravak, the technician said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. We're receiving an encrypted transmission on a Founder frequency. But the origin point doesn't match any known Dominion vessel positions. Gul Ravak moved to the sensor console, his reptilian features shifting into a frown. The bridge of the Cardassian warship Veeder hummed with routine activity, crew members monitoring the border between Cardassian and Federation space, maintaining the uneasy alliance with the Dominion that had promised glory but delivered only occupation by another name. Decoded, Ravak commanded. The technician's fingers moved across the controls. It's Gul, this makes no sense. The encryption matches Founder protocols exactly, but the message is addressing Vorta overseers directly. Bypassing normal command channels. Play it. A voice emerged from the speakers, liquid, harmonious, unmistakably changeling. To all Vorta administrators in Sector 7, recent intelligence suggests Federation tactical capabilities have been augmented by an external strategic advisor. This advisor possesses knowledge of asymmetric warfare beyond current Alpha Quadrant norms. Adjust defensive postures accordingly. Prioritize intelligence gathering on Deep Space Nine personnel movements. Do not engage without confirmation from Founder Command. Message authentication, Omega 77 Blue. The transmission ended. Rivak stared at the communications console, his mind working through implications. That authentication code, verify it against our Dominion protocol database. The technician complied, then looked up with widening eyes. It's legitimate, Ghoul. That's an actual founder authentication sequence. But I'm not detecting any changeling signatures within a dozen light years. Could it be a recording? Something transmitted on delay? Possible, but the timestamp indicates it was generated 23 minutes ago. And Ghoul, the technician hesitated. I'm detecting 6 similar transmissions across the sector. All using different founder authentication codes. All addressing different Vorta chains of command. All with slightly different instructions. Rivak's suspicion crystallized into certainty. Someone is spoofing founder communications. That should be impossible. The encryption is apparently not impossible enough. Rivak pulled up the transmission logs, studying the patterns. Different authentication codes meant different founders, or at least different founder terminals. But the stylistic similarities suggested a single author attempting to mimic multiple voices. Subtle variations in phrasing, slight differences in priority emphasis. Someone extraordinarily skilled was playing a very dangerous game. Ghoul, the technician said quietly, should we report this to our Dominion liaisons? Rivak considered. The Cardassian Union's alliance with the Dominion was built on mutual benefit, Cardassian tactical knowledge in exchange for Dominion military support against the Federation. But it was also built on deep mutual distrust. The founders treated Cardassia as a useful tool, nothing more. They would discard that tool the moment it no longer served their purposes. And if someone was successfully infiltrating founder communication networks, that represented leverage. Information the Dominion might pay dearly to suppress. No, Rivak said finally. We monitor. We analyze. We say nothing until we understand who is doing this and why. Yes, Ghoul. But across the sector, in a dozen different locations, similar conversations were occurring. Vorta receiving conflicting orders from apparent founder sources. Jem'Hadar first officers noting discrepancies in tactical directives. Cardassian intelligence operatives recognizing patterns that shouldn't exist. And aboard Deep Space Nine, in a secure operations center that officially didn't exist, Thrawn monitored the cascade of confusion with clinical satisfaction. The first seeds are planted, he said to Chief O'Brien, who sat at the communications console looking distinctly uncomfortable with their entire operation. Within hours, Vorta administrators will begin questioning whether the orders they receive are authentic. Within days, they will begin delaying implementation pending verification. Within weeks, Dominion command velocity will decrease by an estimated 15 to 20%. O'Brien shook his head. You're impersonating gods, Admiral. That's not something I ever thought I'd be helping with. I am impersonating the communication signatures used by beings who falsely claim divinity, Chief. There is a significant theological difference. Thrawn studied the cascading responses in the Dominion communication networks. And consider, every moment the Vorta spend verifying orders is a moment they are not efficiently prosecuting the war against your people. Still doesn't make it feel right. No. It makes it effective. I learned long ago, Chief, that moral comfort and strategic success rarely coincide. Thrawn gestured to the display showing multiple Dominion response patterns. Notice here, this Vorta cluster in subsector 14 immediately escalated the contradictory orders to Founder Command. Their devotion is strong enough to seek clarification rather than act on potentially false information. But this cluster in subsector 9 attempted to implement both contradictory orders simultaneously, creating operational chaos in their own ranks. Different Vorta strains? O'Brien suggested. Different conditioning protocols. The founders cloned their Vorta from multiple genetic templates, each optimized for specific administrative functions. Some are bred for unquestioning obedience, others for initiative within guidelines. By sending carefully calibrated contradictory messages, we can identify which strains occupy which positions, and thus predict how different parts of their command structure will respond to future manipulations. O'Brien's combadge chirped. Ops to O'Brien. We're detecting increased subspace traffic in Dominion sectors. Looks like they're scrambling to reconfigure their communication protocols. Expected, Thrawn said calmly. Let them scramble. Every protocol they change is another layer of complexity added to their own command structure. Complexity breeds delay. Delay breeds opportunity. The chief studied Thrawn with an expression mixing respect and unease. You've done this before, haven't you? Not here, but in your own galaxy. I defeated Admiral Zarin by making him believe his own fleet was in rebellion. I neutralized Nuso Espa by fragmenting his alliance network through carefully distributed misinformation. I once delayed an enemy offensive by 3 months simply by ensuring their logistics officers received contradictory shipping manifests. Thrawn's tone remained emotionless, reciting facts. Information warfare is as old as warfare itself, Chief. I merely approach it with the same rigor others apply to weapons development. And when the Dominion figures out what you're doing, they already suspect. The question is whether they can prove it and counter it faster than we can exploit the confusion. Thrawn pulled up a new set of communications intercepts. Which brings us to the next phase. The Founders will respond to this threat by centralizing communication authority, reducing the number of individuals authorized to issue commands using their authentication protocols. This makes their command structure more secure but also more rigid. And rigid structures break under pressure, O'Brien said, understanding dawning. Precisely. Once they centralize, we shift tactics, from broad distributed confusion to precisely targeted disruption of their centralized nodes. Instead of making the Vorta doubt all orders, we make them doubt specific, critical orders at strategically opportune moments. A new alert flashed on O'Brien's console. Admiral, we're getting reports from the Klingon border. Dominion forces that were preparing to assault the Yosemite system have suddenly stopped their advance. They're requesting verification of attack orders from higher command. Thrawn allowed himself a small smile. Subsector 9. The Vorta cluster prone to cautious verification. They received 3 different sets of attack coordinates for Yosemite, each claiming Founder authentication. Rather than risk attacking the wrong target and disappointing their gods, they have frozen. Those extra hours could let the Klingon reinforce. Indeed. And when those reinforcements arrive, the Dominion assault will fail. The Vorta commander will be blamed for excessive caution. Trust in Vorta judgment will decrease. The Founders will exert more direct control, creating additional bottlenecks in their decision-making architecture. Thrawn stood, moving to a wall display showing the broader strategic picture. War is not merely the clash of weapons, Chief. It is the collision of entire systems, economic, political, psychological. The side that maintains systemic coherence while fragmenting enemy systems ultimately prevails. O'Brien was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. Captain Sisko trusts you, Admiral. So do I, mostly. But I need to ask, is there any line you won't cross? Any tactic you'd consider too far? Would you like the honest answer or the comforting one? Honest. Always honest. Thrawn turned to face O'Brien directly. In my galaxy, I served an emperor who destroyed entire planets to maintain order. I disagreed with the wastefulness, obliterating planetary populations eliminated potential resources and manpower. But I did not rebel. I did not resign. I served, because I believed the alternative was worse chaos. That's not an answer to my question. Because there is no universal answer, Chief. Every culture draws its ethical boundaries differently. The Federation refuses to employ biological weapons, yet you accept civilian casualties in military operations. You reject genetic engineering of humans, yet you tolerate it in other species. You claim to value all life, yet you destroy Jem'Hadar soldiers who are themselves victims of genetic enslavement. Thrawn's red eyes reflected the glow of tactical displays. I do not judge these contradictions. I simply recognize that morality is context-dependent. What I will tell you is this. I will not employ tactics that undermine the strategic objective. And the strategic objective is Dominion defeat in a manner that leaves the Federation capable of maintaining post-war stability. That's still not. Would I commit genocide to win this war? No, because genocide creates power vacuums and generational hatred that destabilize regions for centuries. Would I sacrifice civilian populations to protect military assets? Only if the military assets are critical to long-term survival and the civilian casualties are minimized through precise targeting. Would I betray the Federation to serve personal ambition? No, because my personal ambition currently depends on Federation victory. Thrawn gestured to the displays showing Dominion confusion spreading across the sector. I am not a good man, Chief O'Brien. I am an effective strategist who has chosen to serve your cause. If that is insufficient for your moral comfort, I understand. But it is all I can honestly offer. O'Brien absorbed this, his weathered features troubled. Finally, he nodded. At least you're honest about it. That's more than some of our own admirals manage. Speaking of admirals, Thrawn pulled up a priority communication flag. It appears Starfleet Command wishes to speak with Captain Sisko. About our operations. The Admiral Ross signature suggests this is not a routine check-in. They found out about the spoofed transmissions. Perhaps. Or perhaps the Dominion complained through back channels. Or perhaps someone in Starfleet intelligence recognized my methodology and wishes to discuss operational boundaries. Thrawn's expression remained neutral. Regardless, Captain Sisko will need to decide how much of our tactical approach to reveal to his superiors. You think they'll shut us down? I think they will struggle with the same question you just asked me, Chief. Where is the line between acceptable tactics and unacceptable moral compromise? The Federation has never definitively answered that question. Which is both its greatest strength and its most exploitable weakness. The communication alert pulsed insistently. Somewhere in Starfleet Command, admirals were demanding explanations. Somewhere in Dominion space, Vorta were frantically trying to restore communication certainty. Somewhere on the front lines, soldiers were fighting and dying while strategists played games with information and truth. And in this operations center, a Chiss admiral from another galaxy was teaching the Federation how to fight a war it had never wanted but could no longer afford to lose. Tell the captain I'm available whenever he needs me, Thrawn said quietly. This conversation with Starfleet Command will determine whether we continue this approach or whether I become a liability the Federation can no longer justify. O'Brien headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Admiral. I'm glad you're on our side. Even if I don't always like how you operate. Thank you, Chief. That is higher praise than you may realize. After O'Brien left, Thrawn returned to his displays, studying the chaos he had orchestrated. Orders questioned. Commands delayed. Certainty eroded one carefully crafted transmission at a time. The Dominion was built on faith. On the unquestionable authority of gods who happened to be shapeshifters. And Thrawn was teaching them that even gods could be impersonated. The question was whether the Federation would allow him to continue. The emergency conference call included personnel Thrawn had never interacted with but immediately recognized from his studies of Federation command structure. Admiral William Ross, tactical coordinator for the entire Federation war effort. Vice Admiral Nakamura, Starfleet Intelligence. Captain Solek of the Vulcan High Command Liaison Office. And sitting physically in the briefing room aboard Deep Space Nine, Captain Sisko, Major Kira, and Odo. Thrawn stood at attention. Not required, but a gesture of respect he'd calculated would marginally improve his position in the coming confrontation. Grand Admiral Thrawn, Admiral Ross began, his weathered features suggesting decades of difficult decisions. In the past 72 hours, Dominion communication networks have experienced unprecedented disruption. Conflicting orders. Authentication failures. Command delays averaging 19% across all operational theaters. 18.7%, Thrawn corrected automatically. My projections estimated 15 to 20%, so we are performing within expected parameters. Ross's eyes narrowed. So you admit you're responsible? I admit that I designed and implemented an information warfare campaign targeting Dominion command certainty. Captain Sisko authorized the operation after reviewing the strategic rationale. Chief O'Brien provided technical expertise. The operation has proceeded exactly as planned. Vice Admiral Nakamura leaned forward, her expression a mix of professional interest and moral concern. You impersonated Founder Communications. You falsified divine commands to a species engineered to worship those gods. Do you understand the ethical implications? I understand that the Vorta are genetically enslaved through biochemical manipulation of their devotional instincts, Thrawn replied calmly. I understand that the Jem'Hadar are chemically dependent on Ketracel white, making them hostages to their own physiology. I understand that the entire Dominion structure is built on coercion disguised as religious hierarchy. My operations exploit that structure. They do not create it. Captain Salak, the Vulcan, spoke with characteristic precision. A logical distinction, but ethically insufficient. The Federation does not employ deception as a primary tactical methodology. Our principles require transparency, honest engagement, and respect for the autonomy of sentient beings, even our enemies. Captain Salak, with respect, those principles are why you are losing this war. The silence that followed was absolute. Admiral Ross's voice went cold. Explain yourself, Admiral. Thrawn activated the tactical display, pulling up casualty statistics with brutal efficiency. In the 18 months since the Dominion War began, the Federation has lost 237 starships, 17 starbases, and 41 planetary defensive installations. Casualty estimates exceed 800,000 across all services. Industrial production has been redirected to military purposes at 73% capacity, creating civilian supply shortages. Colonial expansion has halted. Scientific research has been deprioritized. You are hemorrhaging resources, personnel, and strategic position. He zoomed the display to show Dominion territorial gains. Meanwhile, the Dominion has solidified control over Cardassian space, established supply lines through the Bajoran Wormhole, and positioned forces for potential assaults on core Federation worlds. Their casualties are numerically higher but strategically irrelevant. The Jem'Hadar are rapidly replaceable through cloning facilities you cannot locate or destroy. The Vorta are equally expendable. Only the Founders matter, and they risk nothing by sending servitor species to die. We're aware of the strategic situation, Nakamura said tersely. Are you aware that at current attrition rates, Starfleet will be unable to maintain defensive perimeters within 11 months? That industrial capacity will reach critical failure within 14. That allied commitments from the Klingon and Romulans will collapse the moment either perceives the Federation as a losing proposition. Thrawn's red eyes scanned each face on the viewscreen. You are fighting an honorable war against an enemy who has no concept of honor. You are employing transparent tactics against an enemy built on deception. You are respecting the autonomy of beings who are not autonomous. Captain Sisko spoke carefully. Admiral Thrawn makes valid points about the tactical reality we face. Captain Sisko, you authorized operations that violate Starfleet regulations regarding psychological warfare and communications fraud, Ross said. That's a court-martial offense. With respect, Admiral, we're at war. The regulations were written for peacetime operations. The regulations exist to define who we are, Captain. The moment we abandon them, we become no different than the Dominion. Thrawn interjected smoothly. Admiral Ross, may I propose a thought experiment? Imagine the Dominion has taken Earth. Starfleet Academy is now a Vorta administrative center. Humans are being assessed for potential genetic engineering into servitor species. The founders have declared themselves gods, and resistance is being systematically eliminated. In that scenario, would you still refuse to employ deception to liberate your homeworld? That's a false equivalence, Ross said, but his tone carried less certainty. Is it? Because from my analysis of territorial loss patterns, the Dominion will be in position to assault Earth within 18 months unless current trends reverse. So the question is not hypothetical, it is merely delayed. Thrawn pulled up additional projections. I am not asking you to become the Dominion, Admiral. I am asking you to fight them with sufficient adaptability to prevent that scenario. Solek spoke again, his Vulcan logic cutting through the emotion. Your operations have created measurable delays in Dominion command efficiency. However, they have also created a precedent. If the Federation employs falsified communications as standard practice, we undermine diplomatic credibility in all future negotiations. The long-term strategic cost may exceed short-term tactical gains. A valid concern, Captain, Thrawn acknowledged. Which is why I propose my operations continue under specific constraints. First, all falsified communications are attributed to my initiative, not Federation policy. If discovered, I am the deniable asset who acted beyond authorization. Second, communications are targeted exclusively at military command structures, not civilian populations. Third, operations terminate immediately upon achievement of strategic objectives. Specifically, creation of sufficient Dominion command hesitation to allow Federation forces to regain territorial and industrial equilibrium. Nakamura studied him shrewdly. You're offering to be our scapegoat. I am offering to be your strategist who operates in moral gray areas so your Starfleet can maintain its principles publicly while benefiting from effective tactics privately. Every government at war employs such individuals, Admiral. Your Section 31 performs this function, but they do so from within Starfleet, compromising your institutional integrity. I am external. Disposable. Useful. And if we decide your methods are unacceptable? Ross asked. Then you can find me, Court-Martial Captain Sisko if you must, and continue fighting this war with conventional tactics. The Dominion will continue advancing. More ships will die. More worlds will fall. And in 11 to 18 months, you will face the choice between surrender or the complete militarization of your society. Thrawn's voice remained absolutely even. I am offering you a third option, Admiral. Victory without becoming the thing you fight against. The admirals exchanged glances, visible even through the subspace connection. Ross leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in thought. Nakamura whispered something to Solek, who responded with characteristic Vulcan brevity. Finally, Ross spoke. Captain Sisko, your assessment. Sisko met the Admiral's eyes directly. Sir, I've worked with Admiral Thrawn for 6 weeks. He's manipulative, morally flexible, and operates outside every tactical framework Starfleet teaches. He's also the most effective strategic mind I've encountered. His operations have disrupted 3 supply convoys, delayed 2 major offensives, and created enough Dominion confusion that we've been able to reinforce critical positions without opposition. 0 Federation casualties in any operation he's planned. Because he avoids direct engagement, Kira added, her tone suggesting this wasn't entirely a compliment. Because he prioritizes efficiency over glory, Sisko corrected. Admiral Ross, the Dominion is adapting to our tactics. We need to adapt faster. Thrawn gives us that capability. Ross was silent for a long moment, the weight of command evident in the lines around his eyes. Very well. Operations continue under the constraints Admiral Thrawn specified. But understand, all of you. If this becomes a diplomatic incident, if the Dominion uses these tactics as justification for escalation, if civilian populations are harmed, the entire operation shuts down immediately. Clear. Clear, sir, Sisko confirmed. Admiral Thrawn, you're on a very short leash. One mistake, and you'll find yourself in a Federation detention facility explaining your methods to investigators who are far less sympathetic than I am. Understood, Admiral. I will operate within the parameters established. The transmission ended. For a moment, the briefing room was silent. Then Kira stood abruptly. I need air. This whole situation makes my skin crawl. After she left, Odo approached Thrawn. You manipulated that entire conversation. You anticipated every objection, prepared every counterargument. You made them think they were constraining you when actually they just authorized exactly what you wanted. Yes, Constable. And you're not even ashamed of it. Why would I be ashamed of effectiveness? Admirals Ross and Nakamura are intelligent officers trying to balance military necessity with institutional values. I simply provided them a framework that allows both objectives to be pursued simultaneously. Thrawn began collecting his data isolinear chips. They wanted constraints. I gave them constraints that don't actually limit operational capability. They wanted deniability. I offered to be their expendable asset. They wanted to maintain Federation principles. I agreed to operate outside those principles so they don't have to. Sisko shook his head slowly. You really don't think like we do you? No, Captain. I think like someone who has watched principled governments collapse because they confused moral rigidity with strategic wisdom. The old Republic fell because its Jedi Guardians could not adapt to political reality. I will not permit the Federation to fall for similar reasons if I can prevent it. And if preventing our fall requires you to compromise everything we believe in, then you can court-martial me, execute me if you prefer, and write your history books declaring that you remained pure even in defeat. Thrawn's tone was utterly without mockery, he was stating simple fact. Captain, I am not asking you to abandon your principles. I am asking you to let me protect those principles by doing what you cannot bring yourselves to do. It is a transaction. Nothing more, nothing less. Odo's form shifted slightly, agitation evident. You're treating this like a business arrangement. Because it is. I provide strategic capability. You provide resources and operational authority. Both parties benefit. The Dominion loses. Thrawn moved toward the door, then paused. Constable, you asked earlier if there was any line I wouldn't cross. There is one. I will not allow innocent incompetence to waste lives when effective strategy could save them. If that makes me morally suspect in your eyes, I accept that judgment. But I will not apologize for being useful. After Thrawn left, Sisko and Odo sat in the empty briefing room, the weight of compromise heavy in the air. Benjamin, Odo said quietly, are we making a mistake? Probably, Sisko admitted. But it's a mistake that keeps our people alive while we figure out how to win this war. And right now, that's the only calculation that matters. Outside, among the stars, the war ground on. Dominion forces hesitated, questioned orders, delayed operations. Federation forces regrouped, reinforced positions, prepared for battles that might never come because the enemy was too busy verifying authentication codes. And in his quarters, Thrawn studied art, Vorta devotional paintings, Jem'Hadar ceremonial weapons, Founder propaganda, and planned the next phase of his campaign. The Dominion believed themselves gods. He would teach them that even gods could be made to doubt. One carefully crafted lie at a time. The Battle of Rictor Prime was not supposed to happen. According to Dominion strategic planning, intelligence Thrawn had painstakingly reconstructed from intercepted communications and behavioral analysis, the system was designated as a low-priority consolidation zone. 3 Jem'Hadar patrol groups, minimal Vorta oversight, a Cardassian monitoring station on the 4th planet. The Dominion had already won here. There was nothing left to fight over. Which was precisely why Thrawn had chosen it. The USS Defiant dropped out of warp at the system's edge, accompanied by 4 Klingon birds of prey and 2 Romulan warboats, an unprecedented coalition that had required 3 weeks of delicate negotiation. Chancellor Gowron had been skeptical. The Romulan commander, a calculating woman named Tomalak, had been openly hostile. But Thrawn had convinced them both with the one argument that transcended factional distrust: opportunity. All ships, hold position, Captain Sisko commanded from the Defiant's bridge. Admiral Thrawn, you have tactical command. Thrawn stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by tactical displays showing the Rictor system in meticulous detail. He'd studied this system for weeks, its asteroid fields, its gas giant with 23 moons, its binary stars creating complex gravitational patterns. Every variable catalogued. Every possibility calculated. Commander Worf, transmit the authentication sequence on Founder Frequency Gamma 7. Encryption Protocol Vorta Administrative Override. Worf's hands moved across tactical, though his expression suggested deep misgivings about the entire operation. Transmitting now. The message that flooded Dominion communication channels was simple: all Jem'Hadar forces are to withdraw from Rictor Prime immediately and regroup at designated coordinates in the Calandra sector. Founder Authorization Code Omega Black 17. Victory is life. On the view screen, the Dominion patrol groups hesitated. Thrawn could almost see the calculations happening on their bridges: verify the authentication, confirm with Vorta overseers, execute withdrawal procedures. The weeks of communication confusion he'd seeded throughout their networks had created exactly the response pattern he needed: hesitation before action, verification before execution. They're requesting clarification from their Vorta, Dax reported. Standard protocol after all the false orders they've been receiving. Which will take approximately 4.3 minutes, Thrawn said. More than sufficient for Phase 2. Commander Tomalak, you may begin your approach. The Romulan warbuds decloaked inside the asteroid field, positioned there 3 hours earlier through a subspace transport maneuver that had required extraordinary precision. Their disruptors opened fire on the Cardassian monitoring station, which had been Thrawn's actual target from the beginning. The station's shields collapsed under the sustained barrage. Escape pods launched frantically, carrying Cardassian crew who had no interest in dying for their Dominion overlords. Klingon forces, engage the Jem'Hadar patrols, Thrawn commanded. Chancellor Gowron's face appeared on a secondary screen, fierce satisfaction evident. Finally, some glory. Today is a good day to die. The birds of prey surged forward, disruptors blazing. The Jem'Hadar, still waiting for Vorta verification of the withdrawal order, found themselves under attack from 2 directions simultaneously. Their tactical programming demanded engagement, but their command structure demanded verification. The cognitive dissonance lasted exactly 7 seconds, an eternity in combat. 7 seconds where Klingon and Romulan weapons found their targets unopposed. 2 Jem'Hadar attack ships exploded immediately. The third managed to raise shields and return fire, but it was already crippled, its engines offline, its weapons systems cycling erratically. Defiant, target the disabled vessel with tractor beam, Thrawn ordered. We want prisoners. Prisoners? Sisko turned sharply. Jem'Hadar don't surrender. No, Captain. They don't. Which makes what happens next particularly instructive. The Defiant's tractor beam locked onto the crippled Jem'Hadar ship, pulling it away from the debris field. On Thrawn's tactical display, he could see the Vorta response finally coming through, a frantic message declaring the withdrawal order false, demanding the Jem'Hadar hold position and fight. Too late. The battle was already over. Hail the Jem'Hadar vessel, Thrawn said. The view screen flickered, showing the interior of the damaged ship. Smoke filled the bridge. Emergency lighting cast everything in crimson shadow. And standing amid the wreckage was a Jem'Hadar first, tall, gray-skinned, genetically engineered for combat, his face a mask of controlled fury. "I am First Extanarax," the soldier said, his voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who had never questioned his purpose. "We do not surrender. You may destroy us, but you will gain nothing." "I already have, First Extanarax," Thrawn replied calmly. "I have gained understanding. Tell me, you received an order to withdraw, authenticated with founder codes. You hesitated to execute that order. Why? Because we have received false orders before. We await Vorta verification. And while you waited, your ships were destroyed. Your crew is dead or dying. You are now my prisoner." Thrawn stepped closer to the view screen. "First Extanarax, I am going to ask you a question, and I want you to think very carefully before answering. If the Founders ordered you to die right now, this moment, for no strategic purpose, would you obey?" "Of course. The Founders are wise. If they command death, death serves their purpose. Even if their purpose is flawed. Even if their wisdom is questionable." The Jem'Hadar's eyes widened fractionally, the first crack in his certainty. "The Founders are gods. Their wisdom cannot be questioned. And yet you questioned their withdrawal order. You hesitated. You verified." Thrawn's voice remained gentle, almost sympathetic. "First Extanarax, you were created to serve without question. But in the past weeks, you have been forced to question constantly. False orders. Conflicting commands. Verification delays. Your certainty has been eroded one authentication failure at a time. And now you stand here, alive only because you hesitated when your programming demanded immediate action. Tell me, was your hesitation loyalty or doubt?" The Jem'Hadar said nothing. But something in his expression shifted, confusion, perhaps. Or the first terrible stirrings of independent thought in a mind engineered for absolute obedience. "You don't have to answer," Thrawn said quietly. "The answer frightens you too much. But know this, every Jem'Hadar soldier in the Dominion is experiencing the same erosion of certainty you feel now. Every Vorta administrator questions whether their orders are authentic. Every link in the command chain has been weakened. Not broken. Not yet. But weakened enough that when the real pressure comes, the entire structure will fracture. You cannot defeat the Dominion with words," Extanarax said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "No. I will defeat the Dominion by teaching its soldiers that their gods are fallible. That their orders can be questioned. That certainty is a lie they were engineered to believe but not required to accept." Thrawn gestured to someone off-screen. "Dr. Bashir will transport you to medical facilities. Your crew will be treated. You will be held as prisoners of war according to Federation conventions. And while you are imprisoned, you will have time to think about everything you were never permitted to question." The transmission ended. The Jem'Hadar ship was towed into Defiance shuttle bay, its crew sedated and secured. Sisko approached Thrawn, his expression unreadable. That was psychological warfare. That was asymmetric strategic deconstruction, Captain. The Jem'Hadar are weapons. But weapons that can think, even weapons engineered not to think, can be reprogrammed through repeated exposure to cognitive dissonance. Thrawn pulled up the broader tactical display. This battle was not about Rictor Prime. It was about demonstrating to every Jem'Hadar soldier monitoring communications that hesitation can be survival. That blind obedience can be death. That the Founder's wisdom is not absolute. You're trying to break their faith. I am trying to introduce doubt into a system that has never experienced it. Faith is powerful, Captain. But faith without foundation is brittle. The Dominion built their empire on the assumption that their servitor species would never question. I am teaching them to question. Slowly. Carefully. One tactical failure at a time. Worf spoke from tactical, grudging respect in his voice. The Klingon ships are reporting minimal damage. Commander Tomalak indicates Romulan forces suffered no casualties. We destroyed 3 enemy vessels and captured a 4th with 0 Allied losses. Because we fought them in a moment of maximum uncertainty, Commander. Their tactical programming demanded engagement. Their command structure demanded verification. The contradiction paralyzed them long enough for our forces to exploit. Thrawn gestured to the ruins of the Cardassian monitoring station. And we eliminated a Dominion intelligence asset while demonstrating to the Cardassians that their alliance with the Founders offers them nothing but occupation under new management. Dax looked up from her console. Benjamin, we're receiving a transmission from the Cardassian survivors. They're requesting asylum. They say they have intelligence about Dominion operations they're willing to trade for Federation protection. Thrawn smiled. A rare expression that transformed his typically impassive features into something almost warm. And so it begins. The Cardassians watch their Dominion allies hesitate while enemies strike with impunity. They begin to calculate whether continued alliance serves their interests. Some will defect. Others will feed information to both sides. The alliance fractures incrementally, creating exploitable divisions. You planned this, Sisko said. It wasn't a question. I planned for this possibility, Captain. Strategy is not prediction, it is the creation of conditions where favorable outcomes become probable rather than merely possible. Thrawn began collecting his data isolinear chips, organizing them with meticulous care. The Dominion believes strength lies in hierarchy, in centralized command, in absolute certainty. I am teaching them that hierarchy creates bottlenecks, centralization creates vulnerability, and certainty blinds you to adaptation. The Defiant jumped to warp, leaving Rictor Prime behind, a minor system in a vast war, its strategic value negligible by conventional metrics. But Thrawn understood what others might miss. Wars were not won by holding every system, but by breaking the enemy's will to fight. And will, like faith, could be eroded. One doubt at a time. Hours later, in his quarters aboard Deep Space Nine, Thrawn added a new piece to his collection. A Jem'Hadar ceremonial blade, taken from the captured vessel. He hung it on the wall beside the Vorta devotional painting and the Dominion propaganda hologram. 3 pieces of art, representing 3 pillars of Dominion power, the Founders' claimed divinity, the Vorta's engineered worship, the Jem'Hadar's conditioned obedience. And all 3 pillars were cracking. His door chimed. Enter. Odo stepped through, his changeling features more troubled than usual. The Jem'Hadar prisoners are refusing medical treatment. They're demanding to be executed rather than held captive. They say it dishonors them to survive when their ship was destroyed. Give them time, Constable. The conditioning runs deep. But conditioning can be overcome with patience and consistent countermessaging. Thrawn gestured to the art on his walls. Every Jem'Hadar soldier is taught that death in service to the Founders is the highest honor. But what they're experiencing now, survival through questioning orders, introduces a competing framework. Honor through thought rather than through blind obedience. You're asking them to reject everything they were created to believe. I am offering them the possibility of choice, Constable. Whether they accept that possibility is beyond my control. But the mere existence of choice, the mere suggestion that alternatives exist, is sufficient to destabilize systems built on the assumption that choice is impossible. Odo studied the art collection with an expression Thrawn couldn't quite read. You really think you can win this war with psychology and manipulation? I think I can create conditions where the Dominion defeats itself through its own structural contradictions. The Federation provides military pressure. I provide psychological pressure. Together, we apply sufficient force that their system fractures along its inherent fault lines. Thrawn activated a long-term strategic projection on his personal display. The Dominion will not surrender, Constable. But they can be made to withdraw. To conclude that the Alpha Quadrant is more trouble than it's worth. To decide that maintaining this war consumes resources better devoted to Gamma Quadrant consolidation. You're trying to make them quit. I am trying to make their victory economically and psychologically prohibitive. Which is the only way to defeat an enemy with effectively unlimited resources and no moral constraints. Thrawn deactivated the display, returning his attention to the art. The empire I served conquered through overwhelming force. It failed because force alone cannot sustain empire. Eventually, the subjected populations rebel, the logistics collapse, the center cannot hold. I will not permit the Dominion to avoid that same fate simply because they had the innovation to engineer their soldiers rather than conscript them. Odo moved toward the door, then paused. The female founder has placed a bounty on your head. Every intelligence asset in the Alpha Quadrant is looking for you. The Dominion wants you captured or killed more than they want any strategic target. Good, Thrawn said simply. Fear and obsession cloud judgment. The more they focus on eliminating me, the less effectively they prosecute the broader war. I am, as I promised Captain Sisko, a useful distraction. You're also mortal, Admiral. Sooner or later, they'll find a way to get to you. Perhaps. But by then, the damage will be done. The seeds of doubt will have been planted throughout their command structure. The Jem'Hadar will have learned to hesitate. The Vorta will have learned to verify. The Cardassians will have learned that the Dominion is just another occupier in different uniform. Thrawn's red eyes reflected the soft glow of his art collection. And the Federation will have learned that survival sometimes requires becoming comfortable with uncomfortable methods. After Odo left, Thrawn stood alone in his quarters, surrounded by the art that told him everything he needed to know about this universe's conflicts. The Bajoran mandala. The Cardassian commendation. The Klingon tapestry. The Vulcan sculpture. The Ferengi prophet chart. And now, the Dominion pieces, gods and worshippers and soldiers, all rendered in styles that revealed the emptiness at their core. This was not his galaxy. These were not his people. The Empire was gone, his Emperor dead, his fleet scattered across realities he would never see again. But war. Strategy. The art of turning enemy strengths into weaknesses. Those were universal languages. And Thrawn spoke them fluently. The Dominion thought themselves inevitable. They thought their hierarchy unbreakable, their servitors unquestioningly loyal, their founders unchallengeable. Thrawn would teach them otherwise. Not through heroic speeches or dramatic sacrifices, but through patient, methodical erosion of every assumption their empire was built upon. One forged order at a time. One hesitation at a time. One doubt at a time. Until the day came when a Jem'Hadar soldier received an order and thought, should I verify this? And in that moment of hesitation, the Dominion would have already lost. The war did not end with a single battle. There was no dramatic surrender, no climactic confrontation where good triumphed over evil through superior firepower or moral conviction. The Dominion War ended the way most wars truly end, through exhaustion, strategic calculation, and the slow recognition that victory had become economically prohibitive. 18 months after Thrawn's arrival through the Bajoran wormhole, the female founder agreed to peace negotiations. Not because the Dominion had been defeated militarily, but because the cost of continued operations had exceeded acceptable parameters. Jem'Hadar forces had become unreliable, their conditioning eroded by months of contradictory orders and authentication failures. Vorta administrators spent more time verifying commands than executing them. The Cardassian alliance had fractured, with entire orders defecting to the Federation with intelligence that devastated Dominion logistics networks. And through it all, Grand Admiral Thrawn had remained Deep Space Nine's most valuable and most controversial asset. Captain Sisko stood in the operations center, watching the signing ceremony transmitted from Earth. The female founder sat across from Federation President Tereshinyo, her liquid features configured into something approximating diplomatic neutrality. Treaties were signed. Territories were negotiated. The wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant would remain open but demilitarized. The Dominion would withdraw all forces from the Alpha Quadrant. They had won. Or at least, they had survived. "Congratulations, Captain," Thrawn said quietly from his position at the rear of ops. He'd been granted freedom of the station months ago, once it became clear he had no intention of betraying the Federation. "Your principles remain intact. Your Federation endures. And you accomplished it without becoming the Dominion." "We compromised," Sisko said, not turning from the view screen. "Every forged order, every manipulated communication, every psychological operation you conducted. Those were compromises of everything Starfleet claims to stand for." "Yes. And those compromises saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Possibly millions." Thrawn approached the viewport, standing beside Sisko. "Captain, I have served an empire that refused to compromise and collapsed into civil war the moment its emperor died. I have watched governments maintain absolute ideological purity while their citizens suffered and died. I have watched governments maintain absolute ideological purity while their citizens suffered and died. The Federation is different. It found a way to preserve its core values while acknowledging that survival sometimes requires tactical flexibility. You're saying the end justified the means. I am saying the means were proportional to the stakes. You did not employ genocide. You did not torture prisoners. You did not deliberately target civilians. You simply introduced uncertainty into an enemy command structure built on absolute certainty. If that constitutes moral failure in your eyes, then moral failure is a surprisingly benign category." Sisko finally turned to face the Chiss Admiral. Months of collaboration had not made Thrawn less alien, less calculating, less willing to do what Sisko found distasteful. But they had created something like mutual respect. "What will you do now?" Sisko asked. "The war is over. Your strategic value has been expended. Starfleet Command is already asking questions about what to do with you." "I suspect I will become a professor," Thrawn said, and something like amusement flickered in his red eyes. "Starfleet Academy has expressed interest in my methodology. Teaching cadets how to think strategically, how to analyze cultures through art, how to defeat enemies through understanding rather than overwhelming force. It seems appropriate. You're going to teach the next generation of Starfleet officers how to manipulate their enemies. I am going to teach them how to survive in a galaxy that does not reward ideological purity. Whether they choose to apply those lessons is beyond my control." Thrawn gestured to the view screen where the treaty signing continued. "The Federation won this war, Captain. But the galaxy contains other threats. The Borg. The species from fluidic space. Civilizations in unexplored regions who may not share your values or respect your principles. When those threats emerge, the Federation will need officers who understand that survival requires more than phaser arrays and photon torpedoes." Major Kira approached, her expression still carrying the distrust she'd never quite abandoned. "The Bajorans want to honor you, Admiral. They're saying you saved the station, saved Bajorans from Dominion conquest. They want to commission a monument." Thrawn's expression shifted, genuine surprise, perhaps the first time Sisko had seen it. "That is unnecessary. I serve strategic interests, not moral ideals. I am not a hero, Major." "Maybe not by your definition," Kira said grudgingly. "But a lot of people are alive today who wouldn't be if you hadn't shown up through that wormhole. That counts for something." After Kira left, Thrawn returned his attention to the treaty ceremony. The female founder was speaking now, her words translated into Federation standard by the universal translator. She spoke of peace, of mutual understanding, of the possibility that someday, solids and changelings might find common ground. Thrawn knew she was lying. The founders would retreat, consolidate, plan for the next incursion. But that next incursion would not come for decades, perhaps centuries. And in that time, the Federation would adapt, grow stronger, prepare for threats their idealism had once prevented them from acknowledging. "The Prophet spoke to you when you came through the wormhole," Sisko said suddenly. They asked what you were. Did you ever figure out how to answer them? Thrawn considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I am a strategist from a dead empire, trying to prevent another empire from making the same mistakes. I am a student of art who learned that beauty reveals truth more accurately than intelligence reports. I am someone who believes order is preferable to chaos, but who has learned that the Federation's controlled chaos may be more sustainable than the Empire's rigid order. He paused. And I am someone who found purpose in an unexpected place, serving people whose values I do not fully share but whose survival I have come to value. That's the closest thing to sentiment I've ever heard from you. Do not mistake pragmatism for coldness, Captain. I am capable of loyalty. I simply choose my loyalties carefully and revise them when circumstances change. Thrawn turned from the viewport. The Federation offered me asylum when I had nothing. It gave me purpose when my purpose was lost. It allowed me to do what I do best, understand enemies and defeat them through that understanding. That is sufficient basis for loyalty, even if it is not the passionate devotion your culture prefers. The treaty signing concluded. Applause filled the Federation Council chambers, relief, celebration, the exhausted joy of people who had survived when survival seemed impossible. Grand Admiral Thrawn, the stranger from another galaxy who had taught the Federation how to fight a war it never wanted, stood in the shadows of Deep Space Nine's operations center and allowed himself the smallest of smiles. He had not saved this universe through heroism or sacrifice. He had saved it through understanding, of art, of psychology, of the fundamental truth that every enemy contains the seeds of their own defeat if you know where to look. The Dominion had believed themselves invincible. They had built their empire on absolute certainty, on engineered loyalty, on the assumption that their hierarchy could never be challenged. Thrawn had introduced doubt. And doubt, once planted, grows until it consumes even gods. In the years that followed, Starfleet cadets would study the Dominion War and debate the ethics of Thrawn's methods. They would argue about whether the ends justified the means, whether deception was acceptable in defense of principle, whether survival required compromise or principle required sacrifice. And every debate would prove that Thrawn had succeeded in his true objective, teaching the Federation that idealism without adaptability was a luxury they could not afford in a dangerous galaxy. The stranger from another reality had changed this universe not by conquering it, but by understanding it better than it understood itself. And somewhere in the spaces between stars, in the quantum uncertainties of the Bajoran wormhole, the prophets who existed outside linear time watched and wondered. What was he? The answer, perhaps, was simpler than they imagined. He was what survival required. Nothing more. Nothing less. Live long and prosper. Hit that subscribe button for more stories.